So I'm Leon Rotherer. I own Honest Foods London, which is a location catering company, meaning we cater to film crews, artists, meaning every day we have to deal with special dietary requirements, people who have celiac disease, gluten dodgers, and then vegans and vegetarians, but we've seen that skyrocket over the last 10 years. I was also a Thai boxer, meaning that I trained alongside world champion athletes for many years. We would constantly be discussing diet, things, different ways of achieving the protein we wanted in a healthy way. This is Bridgette, who is a dietitian. She's going to help us through some of the questions that we might have or anything like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you a low FODMAP snack, which is something you could have before training. So low FODMAP is...
A low FODMAP means that it's something that is low in something called fermentable carbohydrates. So they're the kind of carbohydrates found in lots of different types of food that we don't absorb properly. So they're just different types of sugars. We don't absorb them, so they make it through the gut and they then provide food for the gut bacteria, which if you're about to do some heavy training or something, that can make you feel a bit bloated, feel a bit heavy just before training. So we thought we'll come up with some kind of light snack that's low in FODMAPs so it won't weigh you down before you start your training.
Makes sense, right? Because I never thought about it when I was training, if you're going to have like beans on toast or whatever and then go feeling bloated just before you run or train or anything like that.
Yeah, and a lot of athletes are using this before an event now to go low FODMAP for a few days beforehand, just to help them to achieve their goals in terms of performance.
And what did you call one of the things people suffer from? Runners?
So from runner's diarrhea is one of the things that commonly endurance athletes might encounter, and what they've found is that by reducing their FODMAP intake for a couple of days beforehand, they get much better, and that kind of fixes that problem for them. So we thought we'll show you one of these snacks. It's also high in protein, which is one of the things that you could take about 6 grams of protein before a training, and then that will help to optimize your performance as well.
Yeah, this is I suppose this is my take on prawn toast, but we're using a smoked tofu, and I decided to make this completely gluten-free. So it might not look like the most exciting thing in the world.
And so the other thing is that when you have low FODMAP food, you don't want wheat, because wheat is a FODMAP. It's not the gluten as such, but it's the wheat. So it's the short chain carbohydrates found in wheat that's classed as a FODMAP because it's not digested by us. It makes it down through the gut and it gets fermented by the gut bacteria, producing gas as a side effect of that.
So that's gluten-free flour I've used there just to help the soy milk stick. And super easy, you can buy this pressed tofu is what you'd not necessarily get from the supermarket, but you would see in any health food store. And then I'm just going straight into sesame seeds. So anyway, that's how you do that. Super easy. And you know what? You could make a bunch of these and stick them in the freezer.
And could you use any type of milk for that? Any type of nut milk or?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could use anything. But what I'm going to show you next is how you can make a cashew nut mayonnaise, right? So I think vegans are probably aware of this. It's very common replacer. So what I have is soaked cashew nuts. So I've just soaked them in water overnight. Going to go straight into a NutriBullet. I'm going to use this for a couple of dishes today, so you'll get to see what you can use it for. And cashews, you could keep that in the fridge easily for a week or two.
And one of the really good things about this, particularly if you're vegan and you're an athlete, is that this is very high in calories, so it gives you a lot of energy. It's also high in protein, and the soaking as well before you make the mayonnaise helps to release some of the nutrients, so the nutrients become more bioavailable when you're soaking things.
So I'm just going to make a little dip for the tofu. We've got coconut yogurt. I'm going to use a little bit of soya yogurt and coconut yogurt.
One of the important nutrients when you decide to be vegan that you might miss out on is calcium, because obviously calcium comes from dairy products normally in a normal diet. So using dairy replacers like soya yogurts and coconut yogurts is a really good way to make sure that you don't miss out on calcium in your diet if you decide to go vegan. But do just check on the labels to make sure that it has got added calcium because not all of the products do.
And you could flavour that with whatever you want really. I'm going to use a little bit of smoked paprika, a little bit of Tabasco for chili lovers, and I'm going to use a little bit of tahini as well.
So tahini's good. It's also a source of calcium as well. So this is kind of a really nice calcium fortified dip that's going to go with the tofu. So tofu's got a little bit of calcium in it. It's coated in the sesame seeds and the soy milk. So it's going to be a high protein, kind of high calcium pre-workout snack. And calcium's also really good for muscle recovery as well. So if you are going to do an intense workout, then having a bit of protein and a bit of calcium in your system beforehand is a really good idea.
I try and avoid using too much salt where I can, because isn't it true that people, if they maybe don't want to hang on to too much water weight?
Yeah, so sodium can induce water retention, although you do want to maintain a good sodium balance. But adding salt to your food is generally not necessary. A lot of foods already naturally contain some kind of sodium, so you don't normally need to add it. And having too much sodium, as many people know, does have a risk factor associated with higher blood pressure and cardiovascular disease.
This is smoked tofu we've used here. Feel free to grab one. The next thing we're going to show you is, I think people who are training, busy lives, quite often just want something really simple they can do, right? So that's a 5-minute job. We're going to show you a salad. It has to be heavy in calories, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So when you're doing training for athletic events, obviously you burn more calories than normal. It can be quite difficult when you're following a plant-based diet to get all of the calories that you need in every day, because a vegan diet particularly is quite high in fibre, and so the more fibre that you eat, the more full you're going to feel, and the slower that your stomach's going to be emptying. And so it's important that you do manage to pack enough calories and enough protein into your day without overdoing it on the fibre. It's also really important. So we're making this one quite high calorie in terms of a salad, so that there's lots of energy in there. But you also need to have a mix of different proteins when you go vegan. So the problem with plant food is that sometimes it doesn't contain all of the building blocks that you need to build new muscles or new proteins. They're called amino acids. And so plant food isn't rich in all of the essential amino acids. So it's really important that you're having a range of different protein sources. So for example, quinoa is something that contains all of the essential amino acids, but it's got only low levels of a few of them. And so if you supplement quinoa with something like beans and pulses, chickpeas, that kind of thing, then they are high in the ones that quinoa is a little bit lower in. And so therefore you can achieve what you need in terms of essential amino acids by having a mixture of different types of plant-based foods. The essential amino acids are ones that we need to get through diet. We can't make them ourselves. So all the other ones we can kind of put together through different molecular pathways. But when it comes to essential amino acids, we have to eat them in order to have them.
So I'm going to do like a bit of a play on a Caesar salad type thing. So we've got baby gem lettuce, quinoa. I've just boiled that for 10 minutes. Depends how much bite you like in the quinoa. Some avocado. And then I'm going to make, it's kind of like a Caesar type dressing. So we've got the soaked cashews that I told you about. I'm using smoked garlic just for another little layer of flavour. Then we're going to use nutritional yeast, and if you're not familiar with it, it's really good sort of cheese, savoury flavour replacer.
Yeah, so one of the things that's really difficult to get hold of in a vegan diet is vitamin B12, because it's only present in meat and dairy foods, and nutritional yeast. So vitamin B12 is one of the things that if you're vegan you should be supplementing with, or you can use nutritional yeast as an addition to your dishes, to salads, to pastas, whatever it is that you're eating. And there you see that it says vitamin B12 on the top, and it's high enough that if you were taking that daily, then you should be getting enough of your vitamin B12 for that.
So I've got the cashews with a little bit of water, nutritional yeast, smoked garlic, pinch of salt, lemon juice, a little bit of Tabasco. If you want, you could add other things in there, like a vegetarian Worcester sauce or some mustard, or lots of black pepper. Just going to blitz this up.
So avocado is a really good high energy source for vegans, and it can really help you to achieve your calorie intake requirements if you are training on a vegan diet.
And just to loosen it up a little bit, I'm going to use the soy yogurt. So really the basis of this is the blended cashews, the soaked cashews, and you can do so much with it. The consistency is great. Slightly hummusy, but not quite as strong flavour. And I didn't have time to show you this, but what I'm going to do instead of croutons is I've taken here a tin of chickpeas, which I just drain off, a little bit of olive oil, I used onion salt, garlic salt, a little bit of smoked paprika, and just bake them in the oven for about 15 minutes or something like that, and just adds a nice little crunch to our Caesar.
And also what you're doing there is providing a really good full protein complement in the salad by adding the chickpeas to the quinoa, because quinoa is low, it's got all of your essentials but it's low in a couple of them, so the chickpeas complement this salad really well. Other things that you could add to, say, a quinoa dish are things like your lentils or beans or soybeans, like edamame as well would go really well, because they're all high in the type of leucine and lysine, which are the ones that are slightly lower in the quinoa.
Okay, the last thing I'm going to do some mung bean burgers. I think one of the things people struggle with vegetarian and vegan food is finding, you know, good punchy flavors. People think you need that from meat juices, gravies, things like that. So what I'm going to use is miso paste, which is full of those umami flavors that everybody knows about nowadays. You know, you're getting in soy, Marmite, things like that. So it's a really nice savory flavor. We're going to use some kale, which is rich in
calcium, so it's a really good source.
It also is, although it doesn't have a huge amount of protein, it is one of the higher protein vegetables.
It is one of the higher protein vegetables as well.
And like we said before, it can be a bit of a struggle to get the calories needed when training as an athlete with vegan and vegetarian. So we're not being afraid with the olive oil. So I've sweated some onion and garlic in olive oil there. Chopped some kale. I actually steamed the kale. The worst way to cook your green vegetables is to boil them. If you think about it, you end up with just a pot of vitamins floating about in water. Steaming's great. Microwaving's actually surprisingly one of the best ways, because you lose absolutely nothing. You can bake your kale as well. You know, a little bit of olive oil, bake it in the oven for a couple of minutes.
So in there's mung beans.
Yeah, the mung beans, you don't even need to soak mung beans. You can just boil them straight in about. They only take about 15 minutes, they're so small. And they break up really easily. I didn't need to blend them in a food processor or anything like that. You can actually, one way of doing it, and I can't demonstrate it here, is when you fry your onions and your garlic, just throw in the boiled mung beans, and just the action of stirring it will actually break them up. Miso, and then I just literally mixed it together, because I did pan fry these. I quite like using this, which is a coconut spray. But once again, it wouldn't really matter so much. Like if I use a bit of oil.
If you're using it for training and you're doing a lot of quite high intensity training, then you don't really need to limit in terms of like the fats that you're using in cooking, because it's important to calorie load your meals so that you can meet your requirements. However, if you're not doing high intensity training and you're just thinking, I want to try some vegan food that's kind of really healthy, high in fiber and really good for me, then you maybe don't want to pack it full of so many calories. So using something like the 1 cal spray would be perfect.
So I just molded them into patties. You don't need to add anything else to them, you don't need to flour them, you don't need to do anything, straight into a frying pan, couple of minutes each side just till they brown up. When I first thought of this demonstration, I thought it would be gluten-free as well, but I mean, it doesn't need to be, does it?
No, gluten's not like something that needs to be taken out as part of a vegan diet. And actually gluten, being a protein, actually adds to the protein of wheat. So if there's no reason to cut gluten out of your diet, then actually it can help to benefit in terms of your protein profile that you're getting in. It also adds that nice stickiness to bread. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't know about wheat and gluten, is that actually a lot more people react to the FODMAP, which is the carbohydrate component of wheat, than gluten itself. So gluten being the protein component. And they've done a number of studies now where they've taken those little bits out and given them to people, and they find that actually it's the carbohydrate component of wheat that tends to be more reactive and cause really more gas and fermentation.
So all those people who think they're dodging gluten or allergic to gluten, it's actually not necessarily the gluten.
Sort of been getting the blame for all this time, but it's a fairly innocuous protein for most people, unless of course you're allergic to gluten, which is celiac disease.
So I'm just making a slaw, no different. Cabbage, shredded carrot, red onion, but I'm going to add to it some kimchi, which I've just shredded up. Once again, you can get that in any Asian supermarket. It just gives another depth, and with the miso, makes sense. And I'm going to come back and use my cashew nut mayonnaise here as well.
And kimchi is a type of fermented cabbage.
That's right, yeah.
So it's like an Asian fermented cabbage. So again, a little bit like the soaking of the cashews, fermenting foods helps to release the bioavailability of some of the nutrients that are in there. And so that's why fermented foods tend to be getting quite a lot of good press at the moment. And kimchi is obviously one of them.
And if you don't want to use mung beans, chickpeas will work well, kidney beans will work well. Some of the whiter beans like cannellini and butter beans don't tend to hold quite as well. Hey, who's up for a umami burger? We've got like 20, so there should be enough for everyone to have a go.
You're gonna have some?
Well, thanks a lot for coming down, guys.